You talking to me? Oh, there we go.
Hi, everyone. I am Gracie Zeiger with Iowa College Aid, and I am your host today, which means I just talk for a little bit before we get to the good stuff. And that is Mr. Dominic Ione. We have had a series of great workshops this week. So if you're curious about all the topics we had, you can go to our website, iowacollegeaid.gov/ontrack. And these have been in collaboration with ICANN. So you know it has been a wonderful collaboration with great information. But before we get started today, I want to quickly review some housekeeping stuff. We are meeting in a Zoom webinar. Therefore, you will need to use the chat feature to ask questions to our speaker or to me. We'll be actively monitoring the chat. When I am off of here and we're listening to the great information from Dominic, I'll be in the chat so I can either answer your questions there or pitch them to Dominic. All webinars this week have been recorded. So if you missed one, we'll be posting them on our YouTube channel so that you can watch. Also, this one is being recorded and will be sent out to the participants afterwards. If you miss it, feel free to shoot Tamada an email. Her email is tamada.doe@iowa.gov. And with that, I'd like to turn it over to Dominic. He is with ACT, and he is going to talk about the ACT Basics Y test. Thank you, Dominic.
Thank you so much. Oh, you're very welcome. Thank you for introducing me. Yes, my name is Dominic, and I'm going to talk about some resources that the ACT has, what the ACT measures, and why it still makes sense to take the ACT, even though a lot of things have changed in the last couple of years. So, first, a little bit more about me. My job title at ACT is account executive, which is kind of a jack of all trades. I cover Iowa, Nebraska, and Wyoming, and I travel in those states, and I meet with schools and kind of help them find the right ACT tools to meet their academic goals. Before coming to ACT, I was a classroom teacher for 13 years in Iowa, in Des Moines, and then Iowa City, and I taught social studies. So I've got classroom background before coming over to ACT. So this is the topics that I want to cover today, which is basically what are the ACT college and career readiness benchmarks? Like, what does the ACT actually measure? Because there's a lot of misconceptions about that. How to understand your scores when you get them back so that you know a little bit more about yourself and how well prepared you are for college or career after high school. The test prep resources that are available to help you prepare for the ACT. We also have student and parent resources that are not just focused on test prep, but cover a wide range of services. And then I'm going to talk a little bit about MyACT, which is the tool that students use to register for the ACT and to receive their scores back. So I want to start with something simple, which is why should you take the ACT, or should you take the ACT? And the answer is yes, you should. And I'm saying that, and obviously you can take that with a grain of salt because I work for ACT. But I work for ACT because I really believe in the mission of ACT. So there are a number of reasons why you should take the ACT. One is it does give you information about how prepared you are for college. So it's not just giving colleges information about you, it gives you information about yourself. Especially if you're taking that test during your junior year, you get that data back on your own academic performance, and you know your areas of strength and weakness, and you still have time to prepare, because the goal is that when you go into college your freshman year, you are taking credit-bearing courses that count towards your major, rather than what is becoming more and more common in colleges, which is remedial courses that you have to take but that don't count towards your major. They're extra credit hours that you have to take because you had some kind of academic skill that they wanted to see you work on. So the ACT gives you information that is useful to you because it tells you what you need to prepare yourself with. It does improve your eligibility for scholarships. There's a lot of scholarships that many of them don't require the ACT, but if you look at their description of their requirements, they will say that they will take into account ACT scores. So having an ACT score to submit can help you receive those scholarships. They can be used in class placement. A lot of universities do this. Iowa State and University of Iowa, I know, both do it, which is that they can put you into the correct math or the correct English class based on your ACT scores. And then one of the big ones is that it puts you on college's radar. Talking to admissions counselors, one of the things that they say, one of the reasons they give for why they would like students to take the ACT has less to do with the actual score that you get and more to do with the fact that once you take the ACT, colleges find out that you exist and they can start trying to recruit you. And so it gives you a chance to kind of spread awareness of your eligibility for college just by taking it. Now, test optional has been a big movement since COVID started. So I'll talk about that a little bit because it does make a difference. During COVID, Iowa went to test optional at the Regents universities, which is the state universities. And then just less than a year ago, the Board of Regents voted to extend that policy. So for the foreseeable future, until they decide to change it, Iowa is test optional. That means you do not have to submit an ACT or an SAT score in order to apply to those colleges. So does it still make sense to take the ACT in that environment? It does because of a couple of factors. One is that test optional doesn't have just one set meaning or policy. If you're looking at colleges, either private colleges in Iowa or colleges outside of Iowa, when they say that they're test optional, that covers a huge range of policies. And so whether or not your ACT score could help you get into that college, even if it's not required to get into that college, is something that you have to look at each individual college to determine. Pretty much every university has adopted a no penalty policy, which means that if you didn't submit a score and they would have accepted you based on the rest of your application, then if submitting a score, even a low score, won't cause them to not accept you. So there's nothing to lose by submitting a score. But by submitting a score, you might become eligible for scholarships or higher class placements or other things that the college can determine. So the ACT can't hurt you when applying to a test optional school, but it can still help you. And then the last one is that not only may these policies may not last, but also that there's a misunderstanding, I think, for a lot of people about what exactly the Board of Regents here in Iowa declared. So they did say it's test optional, but there's something called the Regents Admissions Index. This is a score that calculates whether or not you are eligible for automatic acceptance, meaning nobody has to review your application based on your GPA, the classes you took, and your ACT score. You are automatically accepted. Now, if you don't submit an ACT score, it doesn't mean you're not eligible for admission, but it means that you're not eligible for automatic admission. They still require an ACT score in order to create an index score for you. So if you want the ability to skip over the review process and be automatically accepted into one of the Regent universities, then an ACT score is actually still required. So that's definitely worth knowing. Okay. So what does the ACT actually measure? This is a place where I think there's a lot of misunderstandings. It measures everything that you learned in school. So it's not an IQ test. It won't tell you how smart you are. It's a measure of what you have learned in your classes. And that's different than the way that so ACT actually was founded in 1959 by a guy who broke away from another testing company because that was essentially an IQ test. And he thought that a much more valuable measure for whether or not students were prepared for college was whether or not they had actually learned anything while they were in school. So that's what the ACT is designed to do. When you look at your scores, every subject area on the ACT has what's called a benchmark score. And you can see them right there. For English, it's 18, for math, it's 22, and so on. So what those scores tell you is whether or not you are prepared for what I was talking about before, that credit-bearing course that will count towards your major. If you get the benchmark score, then our internal research says that you have a 75% chance of getting a C or better in a credit-bearing course for that degree, and a 50% chance of earning a B or better. So if you get a 22 on math, then the ACT predicts that you have a very high probability of success in college algebra, which is the math class that most majors have to take in order to graduate. So regardless of what your major is, I was a history major, I still had to get credit for college algebra, even though I've never used algebra again after taking it, because that's just a requirement for college for a liberal arts education. The highest one you see is the STEM score. So STEM is actually a composite. It takes math and science and it combines them and averages them. And you can see it's 26. And the reason it's so high is because the assumption is that this is for students who are planning on going into a STEM major where the requirements are higher. So if you're going to do engineering, for example, you're going to be required to do, or pre-med or whatever, you might have to do calculus, not college algebra. And so the score that predicts a high level of success in those classes is higher. But those are kind of the target numbers. If you've bought into the idea that you have to get a 36 on the ACT in order to do well, that's not true. Colleges want to see that you're meeting those benchmark scores. And so finding out where you are and having the chance to prepare to hit those scores goes a long way to making sure you're ready for college. So when you get your results back, you'll see a chart that looks kind of like this. You'll see that there are your composite score, your score in each section, and then it'll tell you whether or not you are at, above, or below the benchmark score. And so that's really what you need to be focusing on, is whether or not you're above those benchmarks for each of these. So for example, the lowest benchmark is English. That means that you're prepared for English 101. This student is ready for that. On the other hand, they did not meet the math benchmark. So that would mean that they might need to do some work before they're ready for college algebra. In addition to those big scores, those numbers for each section, you also get a page that looks like this, which breaks down each of those subject areas into smaller skill sets. So this is where this information can be useful to you as a student, because if your goal is, let's say, to prepare for college admission, or if your goal is to prepare to retake the ACT, you don't just know that math is an area that you need to work. You know that, for example, on this chart, algebra in particular is a place where you need to work, and then really need to work on statistics and probability. So it breaks down each of those, and it gives you a ton of useful information on where you are as a student versus where you would like to be. So students are often scared of the ACT, and I get it. I mean, when I talk to people about why they should take the ACT, there's a lot of reasons why. One of the ones that I never say is because it's really fun. It's an assessment. If you go into any kind of profession, you're going to run into lots more assessments as you go, lots of tests that you have to take. So the key is not to be scared, but to be prepared, to make sure that you're not going into it with no understanding of what you're getting yourself into. So we at ACT have tools that can help you be prepared when you're going to take the ACT. The first step is getting registered. So www.act.org is our website. When you go there, you'll see that there is a place to register for the ACT. There are national test sites set up throughout the country, obviously throughout the state. It can be challenging sometimes depending on where you live. You may not live close to a national testing site. If that's the case, there are a couple of options. One of them is to talk to your school administrator about becoming a national testing site. That's something that any school can do. They just have to fill out a form, and they can offer the ACT on a Saturday so that students who live in your district or live in nearby districts can go and test there. There's also test prep materials there, and a question of the day, and also information about how to interpret your scores. And I'll go into each of those in a little bit more detail. One thing that they have on the website is online practice tests, and these are free. So you can take a practice test in each subject, and you can do that at any point. You can do that during your sophomore year to start getting a sense of where you're at and what you want to do and what you want to focus on to prepare to take the ACT your junior year. So I would highly encourage you to check out that resource, because it doesn't cost anything, and it'll give you some baseline scores to start to base your decisions about how you're going to prep for the ACT on. There's also a page for student and parent resources. So this is a place that you can visit with your parents that will help you create an account. It talks about how to set up a college and career plan and how to apply for scholarships as well. We also have something called ACT Online Prep. So that is our in-house product that we create that is an online prep tool that you can use from anywhere, anytime, because it's digital, and it gives you, there's over 3,000 practice questions, but in addition to just getting questions and knowing whether they're right or wrong, it will go through and give a little lesson for each question that explains why the right answer was right and why the wrong answers were wrong. So it kind of takes you through, it gives you practice. The questions that are on the online prep are all questions that used to be on the ACT, but now have been released, so they're not top secret anymore. So the advantage there is that when you're using test prep materials that are not created by the testing company, it's somebody else who's trying to recreate the same types of questions that the company is making. These questions, on the other hand, are exactly like what's on the ACT because they used to be on the ACT. So that's the big advantage that AOP has to offer. And you can get that either through your school, talk to a counselor, or you can get it through the website. So if you've already registered, or if you've looked into registering for the ACT or the pre-ACT, then you've seen this page, which is MyACT. This is where you go and create an account. Once you have an account, this is where you register for tests. It's where you pick the colleges that you want scores sent to, and it's where your scores are reported back to you. Instead of mailing them like in the old days, now they come in through your MyACT account. One little side note I'll make on this, every once in a while, that actually this happens pretty frequently, that a student will make an account maybe at school through MyACT, and then a parent who's trying to be helpful will also create an account for that student. And so now the student has two accounts, which creates all kinds of digital confusion when it's time for you to get your scores back. So if you find yourself in that situation where you know that you have more than one account, I would recommend that you contact our customer service, because they can merge those accounts together and make sure that that all of your scores are being reported the way that they should be. So once you log in, this is where you see all of the resources that are available. Over on the right-hand side, you see there's a spot that says enter student code. So I said, if there's not a testing center near you, you have a couple of options. One of them is to get your school to basically become a national testing center so that it's available on a Saturday. The other option is for your school to offer the ACT at school on a school day. And so that's called district testing. And that's something where either everybody can take it or just students who want to take it can take it. But instead of you having to go to the ACT comes to you. It's a familiar environment. It's, your teachers that you know are your proctors, and it is significantly reduced cost. It's about $30 cheaper to take it through district testing than it is to take it at a national testing site. So that's another option that you could always talk to a counselor about, which is, has our school ever considered signing up for district testing? And if so, what's the process for doing that? And you can always direct them to me, and I'd be happy to help them with that. There's also a lot of test prep materials there. So there's the big red book, which is the ACT prep guide. I'm pretty sure if you click on that, it'll just take you to an Amazon link, because that is the cheapest and easiest place to get that book. It has a couple of practice tests. It's got some content review of what's on the ACT. And then there's some other things that I'll go through in just a moment, but you can see one of them is the AOP, the self-paced course. There are practice tests. So you can see there's full-length practice tests there that gives you a practice test diagnosis that tells you basically a predicted ACT. This is what we think you will get when you take it. And it'll give you some areas of strength and weakness to work on. So that's, again, once you create a MyACT account, which is free, the practice test is also free. There's also a question of the day. So if you want a chance to, every day do a little bit of looking at what's going to be on the ACT, the content covered on the ACT is the same every year. The questions are different, but we have a set of academic standards that all of our questions are based on. So there's not any big swings where one year it's all algebra and the next year it's all geometry. It's going to cover the same academic skills every year. So if you do these practice questions every day, you're seeing the content that's going to be tested. This one is an algebra question, I think. As I said, I haven't done college algebra in 20 years, but it looks like algebra to me. There's also a non-cognitive section, which means that it's not testing your academic ability. It's instead giving you a different kind of information. And this way, in this case, it's college and career planning. So you fill out a series of what we call inventories. They're just really simple, really quick questionnaires. It's not a test. You can't fail it because it's just to learn more about yourself. There's an interest inventory. That one's always good. But what I like about it is that there's not just an interest inventory. There's also an aptitude and a values inventory. And so what those do is they find a job or a career path that aligns with your interests, values, and abilities. Because you could, for example, say, I'm really, really interested in nursing. But when you do your values, it turns out that you don't like to interact with people very much. Well, that's probably not a good career path for you then, because being a nurse involves interacting with people all the time. So maybe you need to find something that's within the medical field, but that is not as people centric. So maybe something working in a lab. So taking these will give you a sense of your own abilities and where you fall. And then it gives you a bunch of exploratory tools where you can look at careers. You can also look at colleges and see their majors and see their average profile of an accepted student, how much they cost. So this is a great tool for finding out a little bit about yourself and then exploring college and career options. Now, this is a big one to note. If you qualify for free and reduced lunch at your school, then you qualify for a bunch of free things. Because ACT is a nonprofit, mission-driven company. Our goal is not to make money, it's to deliver a service, which is helping students prepare for college and career. So if you qualify for free and reduced lunch, you get a couple of things through something called a fee waiver. All you have to do is talk to your counselor, and they just submit a request to ACT for a fee waiver, and we send it to them for free, and they give it to you, and you go into your MyACT and enter your fee waiver number. And then you have the ability to not only register to take the ACT for free, but you also get that AOP software that I mentioned for free. And you can send your scores to more colleges for free. Everybody can send their scores to up to 4 colleges for free, but with a fee waiver, I believe it's 8. So if you fall into that category, you should definitely take advantage of that. You can do Saturday testing for free, free prep software, and free college score sends. If you're not sure if you qualify or not, free and reduced price lunch is an application that your parents fill out. So you may qualify and not know it because maybe they just haven't filled out the application. So once again, talk to your counselor. They will have information about this. And if you qualify for one, then just make sure that we send away for a fee waiver for you. Okay, a couple other things that are available. These ones are licensed by ACT, but provided by Kaplan. So they exist. There's links to them on the website. They are not free, but I thought I would at least mention them as other resources that are out there. The first is the official self-paced course by Kaplan. That is different than the AOP that we offer. This is a prep course that has a lot of video lessons. The AOP software doesn't have video lessons. It just is mostly based on practice questions and then text-based lessons. So if you're more of a visual video kind of person, then this would offer that for you. It does have official ACT questions because since it's licensed by ACT and we do it in partnership with Kaplan, their test questions are licensed by us too. And this one has 5 full-length ACT practice tests for you to become familiar with the test format and getting to know kind of your timing and some of the testing strategies that go along with taking a standardized test. That one, you can get a 6-month subscription, and that's Kaplan's cheapest option. Another one is, this one is also eligible for students to receive 4 free waivers. This is the information that comes with the, if you qualify for free and reduced lunch, then your fee waiver will get you this official self-paced course for free. Okay, another one is live online course. So instead of having videos, you have an interactive live instructor, 16 hours of that. It's going to be probably with a group. It goes over test content, like what's on the test, but it also goes over testing strategies. The class sessions are virtual and they're offered at various times, so you can sign up for whatever is best for you. Your questions, you can ask questions and they're answered by a live teacher in real time. And then you can also get additional support from your teacher during non-camera time. So that's the official live online course. And then there's tutoring. So this is the most expensive option, but it's also the most comprehensive because that's one-on-one with a Kaplan tutor. You get 5 hours of live online tutoring that can focus on your specific areas of strength and weakness. So especially if you've already done practice tests, you already have a sense of where your areas of strength and weakness are, or if you've already taken the ACT and you're thinking about doing another one, rather than hiring a local tutor, you can go through the ACT official tutoring program. And that's just kind of all of those resources together, but I just went through them, so I won't make you read all that again. Okay, I'm going to have time for questions and answers because I'm nearing the end of my information. Another thing that students often ask about is test information release. So typically, the ACT is a secure exam, which means that there's a lot of test security to make sure that those questions don't get out into the public, because we want to have the ability to make sure that everybody's getting an accurate score and that there's not any academic dishonesty going on. However, there is, just at certain times of the year, the ability to request a copy of your test questions and answers. Basically, through the test information release, you get a copy of the multiple choice that was used to determine your score, a list of the answers, and the answer key. But you can only do that if you're testing on national testing, and only if you test in December, April, or June. So it's never available for district testing, and it's only available to people who nationally test in those 3 months. So if you want the ability to take a test, let's say during your sophomore year, so that you can see how you're doing, and you can retake it your junior year, but you really want to be able to go in deep on the questions, then you need to take it in either December, April, or June, and then you can do a testing information release request, and they will allow you to see your actual test questions, answers, and what the right answers were. So the number one takeaway I want you to remember with the ACT is that the goal is not just to improve your scores, because the ACT is a measure of everything that you learned. So an improvement in score means that you actually went back and learned more content. And that means that you're better prepared for what's going to come after high school. So if you focus less on testing strategies and more on doing well in your classes, doing your homework, making sure you're actually learning the things that you're supposed to be learning during high school, you will see those test scores go up, even though you didn't do any specific ACT test prep. That's the best prep you can do, is just to really focus and do well in your classes. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and unshare my screen and see if there are any questions.
Well, first of all, Dominic, thank you so much. That was so informational. We were chatting before about my son had taken the ACT test, and while you were talking, showing like the breakdowns and stuff, had not gone into any of that. So I'm like texting him going, look at all your breakdowns. And I'm sure he's like, oh, that is a little extra.
Well, the extra is what we do at ACT, because we love our data.
As do we at Iowa College Aid. For the attendees on the call, if you have any questions, please pop them in the chat. I will start us off and just ask you, like, for a student who is experiencing apprehension about taking the ACT, what advice do you have for them?
So once again, it's all about just being prepared. I would recommend that you take one of those practice tests, because they're free. Do that 6 months before you plan on testing. Because as I said, what the ACT tests is what you've learned in school. So if you take a practice test the week before your actual test, and you think that you're going to be able to cram for a week and see your score dramatically improve, it won't work. There's no way you can go back and learn a year's worth of high school content in a week. So with 6 months, you can take that practice test, find your specific areas of weakness, and just really focus on those couple of things instead of trying to do everything. So that's kind of, I think, the best preparation strategy. And then the other thing that I would remind you is that as scary as this test can be to somebody who's in high school, it's important to remember that at the end of the day, it is just a test. It is just measuring your performance on one day. It can be retaken. There are lots of things that college look at beyond just test scores. So try to put it in perspective and realize that that test does not tell the whole story of who you are or how you did as a student. You have lots of other measures that go along with it.
Absolutely. I also think there's a misconception, and you touched on it briefly, about how, like, students feel like they have to get the 36 or
Right.
32 to get into a college. And that is just one factor that colleges
It
consider.
is. And I don't think that there's a college in the country that you need a 36 to get into. I mean, there are colleges that are very, very selective, but selective doesn't just mean that they're looking for high test scores. It means that they're looking for well-rounded students that are going to create the type of learning environment that they want. And more what modern colleges want is kids who have done things outside the classroom. They want a diverse student body. They want things that go well beyond just how well students are doing on tests.
Absolutely. Now, for parents or professionals that have students that are maybe disinterested or not like the most excited to take a practice test, I know,
Sure.
crazy. Do you have any advice for the adults in students' lives who want to help them be as prepared as possible?
Yeah, I think that, like I said, the number one way to prepare for the ACT and see scores go up is to focus on school, because it's a measure of what you learn in your classes. So if your student is resistant to the idea of specifically test prep, just focusing on making sure they're up to date in their classes, talking to their teachers regularly about how they're doing, having conversations with them about what they're learning in the classroom. All of those things are test prep, because anything that helps them learn more about what they're learning in school is going to make their scores go up.
Love it. Well, it doesn't look like we have any more questions.
Okay.
I do want to thank you so much, Dominic. It was just a wealth of information, even as someone who kind of works in the field. So we very much appreciate your time with us today.
Well, I appreciate you having me. I like being here.
Definitely, for sure. As a reminder, we have had a variety of topics this week in collaboration with ICANN. All of them, including this one, are recorded and will be posted to our YouTube channel. So if you had to like zone in and out, as we often have busy lives, or if you couldn't sign up for one earlier this week, you can go back and watch them there. You can find out more information about all of the webinars we had this week at iowacollegeaid.govs/on-track. And you will receive a recording to the link later. If some chance you did not, oh, I am sorry. It looks like we do have more questions in the Q&A. How many times can you take the test?
Well, technically you can take it up to 12 times. I don't necessarily recommend that anyone take it 12 times, but after 12, ACT will tell you that's more than enough and you should be done. But, I would say, once again, if you're taking it that many times, you're probably chasing an arbitrary score that doesn't matter as much as you think it does. The exception to that rule is if you are trying to get into a very particular program, right, that says that you have to have a 28 in math, because they rarely give you a full composite score, but sometimes they'll give you a specific score that you need to get into a particular program. Yeah. Then you can do a retake, but the goal is to make sure that you're doing some prep in between. Don't expect that score to just magically go up on its own. On the other hand, if you took it once your sophomore year and now you're taking it your junior year or junior year to senior year, you should expect to see your score go up because you've had more school and therefore you've learned more stuff.
Absolutely. And so important to for a sophomore not to get discouraged because they didn't get.
No, because your score is based on what you've learned in high school and you're less than halfway done with high school at that point. So it's really, if you're taking it your sophomore year, it is just a baseline. It is not telling you how you're going to do a year from then.
Yeah. How do you find a list of the national centers?
Good question. So that if you go to act.org, the main website, you'll see a link there that will take you to all of the list. Basically, you put in your state and it'll show you what the national testing sites are. You can also, I think, put in your zip code and it'll show you what's close to you. But once again, if there's not anything super close to you, if it's going to be a 2-hour drive, before registering and getting in the car, ask your school if they would consider becoming a Saturday testing site, because there's not a limit. I mean, they could offer it. Same thing with district testing. They can offer it for 2 students. It doesn't matter how many are doing it. We just need to put them in the system.
Beautiful. What scores start qualifying for scholarships? And then what's a perfect score?
So 36 is a perfect score, although it's kind of, so we report scores in score bands. So the highest score band is 34 to 36, which means that according to the psychometricians at ACT, there is no statistical difference between a 34 and a 36. So that score band is the highest possible band. So if you get a 34 and you're chasing a 36, the number crunchers at ACT would say you're kind of wasting your time, because you might get a 35, you might get a 36, but you're still going to score in the same band. As for what numbers qualify for scholarships, it 100% depends on the scholarship. Every scholarship is going to have its own criteria. Some that are really academically focused might have really high numbers for that ACT, but others might just want you to submit an ACT score just so that they have it for their records, but that scholarship might be more focused on, say, public service. So you just got to look at the description for each individual scholarship.
This person didn't ask this question, but what would you say is like the average score students fall into, or the average band?
That they start, oh, the average band?
Yeah.
Oh, I think nationally last year, the average composite score was, you know what? If you give me a second, I can find out for you.
Absolutely. While you look that up, their next question, just so you know, is going to be, what's the difference between the ACT versus the SAT?
Okay. So in 2021, which is the most recent year that I have full data for, the average ACT composite score was 20.3.
Okay.
So that's nationwide. Difference between the SAT and the ACT. Well, so the SAT just has two categories instead of having all the different subject areas. So it doesn't have a science section. It has a verbal and a mathematics section. It's on a different scale. So if it's at a 1600. So if you're comparing your ACT score to your SAT score, you can find websites that will basically give you a conversion number. But you know, a 28 is great on the ACT. 28 is an impossibly low score to achieve. I don't think you can get a score lower than 400 on the SAT. And they have, I mean, they're different companies with different philosophies. Actually, the company that the ACT founder broke away from was SAT. He was on the board of SAT before he founded ACT. I think they're a lot more alike now than they were in the 1960s, but it's definitely worth researching the differences between them. We have a lot more reporting categories, which is something we're really proud of. But it used to be, the conventional wisdom used to be, even when I was in college or when I was in high school, that if you wanted to go to college on the coasts, you should take the SAT. And then if you wanted to go to college anywhere in the middle of the country, you should take the ACT. And that is no longer the case. And every college that accepts one of those scores accepts the other one too. So those things have basically become universal now.
Yeah, I definitely grew up with that sentiment too. Like when I saw the question, I was like, oh, you know, if you want to go to California, you got to do the SAT.
Yeah.
So it's good to know that that's not the case anymore.
Yeah.
I don't think there are any more questions now.
Well, those were good questions.
They were very good questions. Solid across the board. Part of the reason I asked about the average, I think it just helps for people to know.
It puts things in perspective.
Exactly.
Yeah. If you get a 22, you might be disappointed in yourself, but that is 2 points above the national average.
Exactly. So thank you again so much. And thank you everyone for joining us. If you have any questions for me or Dominic, we'll be here for a couple more minutes. Otherwise, we were so happy to have you all here today, and check our YouTube channel for the post of the other webinars this week.
Great. Thank you.